Welcome back to another edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary, and Rutgers beat reporter, Alec Crouthamel. Alec was at the game on Saturday in Blacksburg. We're going to talk about his experiences both on campus and off campus while he was there. We're going to go over our game thoughts after we've had some time to ruminate on them. We're going to talk about Schiano's pre-Washington week presser, and we're also going to look ahead to some of the opponent scores in the near future from this past week as well. But first, this podcast is presented to you by Knight and Day Apparel. Get ready for football and tailgating season with Knight and Day Apparel. Our apparel is designed to keep you comfortable and stylish from the pregame excitement to the final whistle. Whether you're grilling in the parking lot or cheering from the stands, our high-quality gear has you covered with unbeatable comfort and team spirit. If you use our promo code Rutgers Rivals, you can get 10% off your purchase. Score big this season and keep shopping with Knight and Day Apparel. Like we said earlier, you need a blackout shirt. Definitely go there and get one. But let's talk about the Blacksburg experience from Mr. Crouthamel. You went down, you saw the victory, and you got out of there as quick as possible. Tell us a little bit about why.
Yeah, I did. Blacksburg itself was very nice. The campus was really cool. Just kind of driving around. It's really is that like college town that they kind of just plopped in the middle of nowhere. But I thought it was a really cool town. The tailgating environment was awesome. There's so many lots around. I parked behind the tennis complex, and there's like a baseball field, like a little league baseball field. I was driving on a sidewalk, so that was a little interesting to actually get there. But I mean, it really wasn't that far from the stadium either. Just the whole stadium environment was really cool. There was like I said, there was a lot of tailgating. Even in the parking lots, there were a lot of surrounding lots, things like that. So we drove down on Friday morning. Even though I'm not a part of the riot squad anymore, I tagged along with them because I wanted to go to that game anyways. So we drive down Friday morning, excuse me. We left at about 8:30 in the morning. We got there around 4. When you add in stops and all that stuff, we stayed in an Airbnb, a really big like cabin, like you said, cabin in the woods. And the funny part about it was when I had a feeling based on just the fact that it's a big cabin in Virginia. It was probably going to be pretty far off the beaten path, but I didn't know it was going to be as far off the beaten path as it actually was. So we get off I-81. We go on like 45 minutes of back roads where there's like no reception at all. And I mean, there were some houses, but it was like a really small road too. And I drove, as Richie called it last year, preparing for the Indiana trip, the mom's minivan, that same car. And it's not a small car. So I was a little bit worried about that. And then when we pull up to the place, it also serves as like an adventure school or something, I think, because it's like a really big place or whatever. So we pull up and it's like a gravel road that we take off of the already back road that we were on. And then we drive up and we see a wooden sign hanging from a tree that says Big Hill, speed up. And I didn't realize I sent Richie the picture of the hill. I didn't realize what exactly we were dealing with. So I floor it. I go up about like 35 miles an hour up this gravel driveway up the hill. We make it up, thankfully. And once we get to the place, it was a very nice place, I will say. It fits a lot of people, really beautiful views. And of course, one thing that you're not going to find a lot in New Jersey, I mean, there's no light pollution because like I said, it's way off the beaten path. So you could see all the stars and all that. It had like a nice lake. It had a really cool view of the mountains and like a clearing within the trees. It was a little bit buggy, I mean, as you would expect when you're in the woods, but overall, very nice place. But when I got there and I got out of the car, I said, I do not want to drive up this hill again. And we decided, let's get out of here after the game. So we wake up on Saturday. We go to the game. It was a lot of fun. We got there around like 11 or so. So the game happened. Obviously, Rutgers wins, all that. I published my article, and I may have had 1 or 2 typos because I was in a rush. But I fixed those eventually. And we leave at about 7:30 from Blacksburg. Fill up the car with gas. I watched the TKR post-game show. If you guys were watching, which by the way, heck of a lot of viewers this weekend. So great job to everyone that tuned in.
Yeah, there were some serious sickos. There was almost 1,000 people concurrently watching it. Yeah.
So I was listening to that.
So close.
On the drive home, we get back to New Brunswick, pull into New Brunswick at about 3:15 in the morning. And so we unpack, and then I just decide if I've already driven 7, 8 hours, I might as well just take the extra 25 minutes to go back to my house. So I did. I finally get into bed at about 4 o'clock. I didn't fall asleep until like 4:30 because I actually slept for like an hour and a half on the drive back at about like 1 a.m. Shout out Chase Jacoby, who also works with us at Rivals, who took it home the last hour and a half. So yeah, that was the Blacksburg experience. Then I woke up at 9:30 the next morning, very tired, and but that honestly, I think it was a very worthwhile trip. I had a lot of fun going down there. The stadium was awesome. It was packed to the gills to start out the game. After halftime, the student section kind of thinned out a little bit, but from the side that we were on with the press box, the lower bowl was completely full for the entire game. So yeah, really fun stadium. I don't want to say I would go back there in a heartbeat because it's really hard to get down there, but if I had I wouldn't mind going again, is what I'll say.
Let me just clarify. You did this all on your own. I didn't force you to do anything.
Yeah, I did make sure to say that after the last time I did something pretty stupid with covering Rutgers, which was go to Maryland and then leave for Purdue the next morning at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So
yeah, this makes it 2 years in a row now that I have traveled far away for a Rutgers football game. It's funny, for Indiana last year we left at like 3:45 in the morning, and then this time I get home at 3:45 in the morning, so it's kind of full circle.
It's fair.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal that you were in Lane Stadium at like 4 p.m. for a kickoff of a football game, and you're in your bed. I think you said at 4 a.m.
Yeah,
I think that was the message you sent out. But so I mean, it looked like a great environment. Was Enter Sandman everything that you thought it would be as a walkout, and just general, like how was the crowd throughout the game? Did Rutgers have them silenced throughout most of the game until the fourth quarter?
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of back and forth. Like the place would get really loud, especially to start out the game. And then when Rutgers started to punch him in the mouth a little bit, it started to get a little bit quieter. But then that fourth quarter, I mean, it was just as loud. When they tied the game, I think it was the loudest it was all game, despite the fact that some of the stadium had started to clear out a little bit. Enter Sandman was awesome. I mean, I'd watched a ton of YouTube videos about it before I went, just to see what it'd be like. It wasn't the same as it probably would have been in the dark with all the lights on and stuff. But I mean, given it was a 3:30 kickoff, but it was still really cool. And even being inside the press box, where you're not open air, you can't hear it all. It was still a really awesome thing to watch. I know I recorded a video of it. Finally, was able to post it on Twitter yesterday. And then Brian Fonseca from NJ Advanced Media, he was actually I think he was in the stands a few rows up, like outside for it. So it was really cool. Basically everything that I could have asked for out of like the pregame environment for that game.
Sweet.
So let's talk about the game. I rewatched it this morning to kind of take a little bit more of like a measured view of things. I thought Rutgers did a lot of things really well in this one, especially early on, obviously. To get a 23-7 lead against a Virginia Tech team that's got a lot of weapons. They have a lot of talent. They might not be the best coach team. They might have a quarterback who's a little. Well, they might have a quarterback who can miss a lot of easy throws, but he'll make that up with some big plays with his legs and with his arm. I thought Kirk Soraka's play calling for most of this game was brilliant. Like it's definitely the best game that he's called as a Rutgers as a Rutgers offensive coordinator. A lot of the stuff he was just doing to like layer in similar looks of the same call to allow for certain plays to kind of develop later in the game were pretty cool. Like we talked about the tush push that he does it with the quarterback on third down, or on, was it second down? I think it was second down. Then on third down, he does the fumble Ruski to Kyle Monungai to get the touchdown. I want to highlight another series that I thought he was brilliant calling plays. You call the same play over and over, and whatever. It might not sound like the most nuanced way to call plays, but I thought this series here was great. And if I can find the window here, I'm going to share it with audio, but keep it low. So this is
I was just looking at this on ESPN. I have the game log. I was going to talk about that.
Yep. So this is we got 7 minutes and 6 seconds left in the second quarter. I hope this isn't too loud. Let me know if it is, guys.
You're going to turn that audio down a little.
All right, 2nd and 6 here. We run that same motion with Ian Strong, and we dump it off to Kenny Fletcher. That play was available to seemingly all day.
They've had success on that play today.
But they just couldn't find a way to defend it. And I think it's because if you watch, those tight ends line up on the opposite side of the rollout. So you kind of have to decide, okay, am I going to bring my man over to cover him if it's man, or am I passing it off correctly if it's zone? And, Athan can do three things here. He can run it, which it looks pretty clear he's got a lane here. He could pass it off short to the tight end, or he could pass it long if the receiver down the sideline's wide open. So the defense bites on the tight end here. If you watch the corner almost tips this ball, or you can hand it off to the running back. It's a really just a brilliant play to keep running until the defense can show they can stop it. So here they set up the tight end throw with now the pass to Daimir Miller. So just like the rapid succession, you throw the defense off balance, and now they kind of can't expect the same play out of the same look the rest of the game. So that's just like one sequence I thought was really strong. There were some things I didn't like too, but what were some of the things that stood out to you guys?
I'd say that exact series, like they had a touchdown too, which kind of sucks because not that it would have been game changing because they did end up getting a safety the very next possession or next series. And then they ended up going up 23-7 to start just the second half. So it didn't really matter, I guess, at the end of the day. But I feel like momentum-wise, instead of getting – maybe I'm wrong because I guess the safety was pretty momentum shifting. But go up 21-7 on a Virginia Tech team at half, I feel like they were already – that kind of morally defeats them. But I guess you can say they were already kind of morally defeated when it was 16-7 after the safety.
Yeah, it was 16-7 at half. They quickly scored. They scored on the first drive out, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that same thing. I mean, Mike and I talked last week about how we probably will see them open up the playbook a little bit more. And when I said opening up the playbook doesn't always mean trick plays, throwing it deep, things like that. It could just mean layering things on top of what you're already calling. That's kind of what I meant, that we saw a lot of this game where, you're adding another option that you're going to go to, or maybe not that it wasn't an option, but it wasn't the primary read and what you want to see to kind of, I guess, shrink the playbook a little bit against the first real testing defense of Virginia Tech, where you really do see them open it up. And I mean, he looked like at certain points, like that play was just completely unstoppable. And like you said, Richie, Kenny Fletcher almost had another touchdown. He got absolutely rocked by Lawson and Delane on that play. And then, it led to the safety. But still, I liked a lot of the play calling in the first half especially. It just felt like no matter what Virginia Tech tried to do, Rutgers always had a bit of a step ahead on them. And it just led to a lot of success in the first half. The second half left a little bit to be desired. I mean, I know you guys have already talked about that on the post-game show, but they were still – it showed that they were able to respond when, their backs are against the wall like they did. Now, granted, it took a really big play to start out the drive, and that screen by Ian Strong, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more too. I mean, that screen to Ian Strong, that was a great design play, and then he made a perfect read by going straight upfield and getting around the defense. So, the second half, like I said, left a little bit to be desired play calling wise, but they also showed resilience in they hadn't really been tested. Granted, Virginia Tech as a team was a test, but they hadn't been tested situationally before, and they passed their first tests.
By the way, Kenny Fletcher, 4 for 34 on that drive alone out of his 7 catches for 61 on the day.
Yeah, no, Kenny Fletcher, you can't say enough. Other than the fumble at the goal line, he had a great game. I thought Virginia Tech clearly game planned to just stop the run, especially the runs up the middle. They were not going to let Rutgers beat them that way, and the running game really struggled. I'll admit that. It didn't seem like, for a lot of the game at least, that we were able to, break that first tackle at the line of scrimmage like we had in the first couple of games, especially Kyle Monungai. I'm not sure if he was playing hurt or if he was sick or if there was some kind of bug going around on the team. All this is speculation here. Greg did say after the game that, Kyle's never going to be 100% this offseason or this season because of the workload he takes on. So kind of file that one away that, Kyle might be a little dinged up. Because Sam Brown, he was getting some tough yards early on. He was consistently getting yards after contact, driving forward the pile. There was one play where he got literally 10 yards after contact, just bullying the pile from a 2-yard gain to a 12-yard gain. But Virginia Tech essentially dared Rutgers to throw the ball. And you know what? They dominated them on short and intermediate passing. So if you look at Ethan Kaliakmanis's drive chart or passing chart, he went 16 of 18 in the short and intermediate passing game. He was basically automatic. Like if you were gonna you block up the middle, we're gonna tear you up, with slants. We're gonna tear you up with those option plays to the tight end. And the only place we struggled passing the ball was throwing deep. We were 0 for 5 throwing deep in the game, which you got to have that as an element of your offense, but you got to connect on at least one of those because those were all basically drive killers. We were in the red zone. We threw one on 2nd and 8, made it a 3rd and 8, which is really tough to convert in the red area. There was one on like 3rd and 24, which you have to kind of throw it deep in those situations. But a lot of those deep passes ended up really stifling drives. So yeah, there's his total chart. But I thought Ethan was fantastic throwing the ball in a game where we really needed to throw the ball well. And it just shows you that, we might be able to fight two-handed this year instead of one-handed, which is obviously the only real way to win games consistently in the Big Ten is to be able to be multiple on offense. Defensively, though, I thought – did you have something, Rich?
Yeah, I just realized I was on mute. Anyone that thought that Ethan wasn't the guy and they weren't able to compare this to last year. And I hate to nitpick, but this team is not doing anything like this in the pass game last year. This is a completely different team. And like you said, they can actually fight two-handed. You don't have to just rely on a dominant run game. Now you have a little bit of a pass game now, and that helps with an accurate quarterback. He's basically the perfect soldier for Greg Schiano and Kirk Shiraka. He does what he needs to do. He doesn't do anything fancy. He's not going to have the strongest arm, the most accurate. Or I shouldn't say the most accurate. He's pretty accurate. But he's not going to have the strongest arm. He's not going to have the flashiest moves. He's not going to run for 100-something yards, but he'll do what you need him to do, and that's just execute at that first and second level, and you see it in that chart that we just had up too.
Defensively, though, Rutgers, I don't know the full solution to how we fix this run defense, but it's struggling big time. So if you look at where Rutgers stands currently in terms of how they're playing run defense, they're allowing 161.3 yards per game on the ground, which is 89th out of 133 FBS programs. On a yard per carry basis, it's even worse. They're allowing 5.5 yards per carry, which is 119th in the FBS. And if you look at the competition we were playing, not great. Howard's not great. Akron's not great. Akron's one big long run was against the second team defense. So you got to take that into account as well. But Virginia Tech was basically getting what they wanted on the ground, especially to the outside. If you look at what we're doing in terms of inside runs versus outside runs, we're allowing almost 10 yards a carry on outside runs this year. That can't happen. That can't continue. There's a few reasons why I think that is. But on inside runs, we're only averaging around 4 yards per carry allowed. The 4 areas that I kind of identified as to why, and you guys can maybe tell me if you agree or if you have other areas you were thinking of, our linebackers just haven't really been able to sort through the trash as well this year. Mm-hmm. They're not able to get through the line of scrimmage like we were last year with Jennings and Toure and Powell. Powell, that first play of the game, Powell, has, reads the play perfectly and drops Tootin for a 2-yard loss. There wasn't as many of those kind of plays as you need in a game against a really dangerous runner. I found out listening to the Tech Sidelines podcast today that Bashal Tootin leads college football in forced missed tackles this year with 30. So I guess it's not the biggest negative when you're facing a guy like that. I also think number 2 is our defensive ends really haven't been getting the push needed in the run game. They've been doing a lot of over pursuit, and that causes, when you over pursue, it causes guys to bounce it outside, and when you can't get a push and you can open that lane to the outside, it becomes a lot harder to defend. Opposing tight ends and offensive tackles have been really sticky in blocking to our linebackers and safeties when we're in pursuit, which has opened huge holes. And unfortunately, the worst thing you can do is miss tackles in these situations, and Rutgers has been doing that in spades this year. In terms of defending the run game, we had 52 missed tackles all of last season. That's through 13 games. That's 4 per game, and that was good for the 4th best tackling grade on PFF last year. This year, We've missed 20 tackles in the run game already, which is almost 7 per game, and we have the 89th best tackling grade according to PFF. So again, some of these issues aren't easy to fix. Some of them are. What have you guys noticed in the run game that's kind of created so many problems for Rutgers this year?
I'd say the linebacker thing is pretty spot on. I know they're a little green, they're still learning, but going to last year, like comparing last year to this year, the average depth of a tackle for the linebacker room between Mohamed Toure and Deion Jennings was 4.5. These guys are just getting, I feel like, way past that. Like you said, broken tackles. Those two were very reliable seniors. What was Deion Jennings in like his 5th or 6th year? Toure is going to be in his 5th or 6th year next year. So, I mean, it's going to help to get him back, but losing him hurt a lot. Then Tyreen Powell, I know he played a lot this week, but the first 2 weeks he didn't play a single snap. Plays a factor. Even this week, it's still just shaking off rust. The guy had an Achilles, had a wrist injury. Like, you're probably cautious out there. I know he played a lot and he played solid, but you got to be cautious when you're coming back from injury, and you just get nervous too. At the end of the day, it's God forbid something was to happen again. He gets, knock on wood, you're done. Like, so you got to kind of shake those nerves, shake that rust off. I think they'll get better with time and just more playing time, honestly, and more snaps for these guys. Like Jabome and Walker, we saw rotate in a lot with each other this week, and I think you'll see that going forward. I know Jabome graded out really highly, but there's still some struggles there. He still needs to learn a little bit. And like you said, the shedding of the blockers too. They just can't really just shed off of them. Whereas that veteran experience, like a guy like Jennings last year, was able to shed off just about anybody.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the linebackers, you put it right. I think people were kind of understating what it would mean to lose Deion Jennings over the offseason. It was talked about, but I don't think it was talked about enough, just having one of those veteran guys like Richie and Mike were saying. Yeah, and the same thing with Tyreen Powell with the Achilles. We've already seen a couple of high-profile examples in the NFL with Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. Granted, completely different positions, but it's still the same thing where you're still learning to trust that area of your body again so that you can fully go back to where you were before. It's still all about breaking that mental block and just trusting that you can have that same burst that you had. And we saw Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers in their week 1 games, they could barely move out of the pocket. And now Tyreen Powell, I think, performed better in that situation. It's still about getting that trust back and making sure that you're making the right decisions. And yeah, I think with the outside runs as well, I think you put it right that, when you start to not be able to get around the blocks, you start to over pursue, and then you break containment, and all of a sudden let's say the left tackle is all the way around the pocket and in towards the quarterback, you can easily make a run up the middle. And we saw Kyron Jones do that a few times on Saturday where he just steps up and has a lane in front of him and takes it. He had a couple of big runs, and then breaking tackles. The first touchdown he had was on that jet sweep where they go empty set and they just have him motion back into the backfield across the field in the jet sweep, and they give it to him. And then, I thought Shaquan Loyal very obviously got held on that one. That's just, one of those misses that happens from time to time. They're not going to call every hold. But even before that, it seemed like he just got a little bit too far upfield before anyone could even get close to him. And by the time they got to him, he was already basically in the end zone. So I'm interested to see how they try to fix that. And I think with time, like Richie said, it's going to get better. But also the missed tackles, that's always been a Schiano tenet of being disciplined and always making tackles. I think it's something to look out for. On one of the good sides, one of the things that have always stuck out to me, Daryl Jabome forcing that fumble, that was a classic bite the ball type tackle where you put your helmet directly into the ball and you just punched it out. So that was a very good play by him. I think we'll see improvement just by being on the field and seeing a lot of looks more and more as the season goes on.
Look at the top 4 missed tackles. Mike, I'm assuming you probably have for the run game at least this year. Kaj Sanders, true freshman. Desmond Igbinosun, that's an issue for a veteran like that. Bo Mascow played 1 game last season, and then Daryl Jabome, second-year player, who has never started a game until this year. So it's just they're green. They need to learn better. A little more. Develop better.
Yeah.
There we go.
Robert Longerbeam led the team with 2 missed tackles, more than made up for it with the play at the end. But, if you look at what Virginia Tech did on the ground, they had they forced 9 missed tackles on 26 rush attempts. They had 188 yards on the ground. 148 of those came after contact. Like, they were just – like, Bishal Tootin alone had 100 yards after contact. it was a rough day for the run defense. I hope they can get a lot of this fixed. We will see if that does get fixed, but wasn't the best day for our rushing defense by any means. I thought the passing defense held up well. It helps when Kyron Drones didn't really have his best day accuracy-wise. There was more than a handful of throws where it was just like he totally didn't even get into the same area code as his receivers. They had wide open guys streaking downfield. Felton was open multiple times, and he overthrew him. There was a couple times where he overthrew Stephen Gosnell on the sidelines. He did not have his best game by any means. I think the biggest issue I had, it was twofold. I think execution and coaching screwed us a little bit in this game. I really don't mind the aggressiveness. I prefer it, honestly. If it's 4th and 1 from the 1 yard line, I am all about going for it, especially when you have a run game that's been as good as it has been this year. I don't like the rollout on the 4th and goal from the 1. I would prefer to just go down with the ship, running Sam Brown or Kyle Monungai. I think there's two things you can second guess, and you have to kind of deliberately separate them. One is the decision to go for it. We're going to do this. I trust my team. The other is the play call. I feel like the play call is the trickier one. It's like, are you really going to, say you should do this for that? That's why I don't really want to focus on the play call, even though I didn't necessarily agree with it. The decision to go for it, I totally agree with. There's two main decisions that I didn't agree with that I think were probably like negative expected value of this game that Schiano made. The one was the 53-yard field goal in the 4th quarter. We're up by 16 points, right? We already have a kicker who's missed it once from 36 yards. The wind was blowing in wasn't helping them. It was blowing out into their face. So it was going to be a long field goal, rough environment. Wind's not in your direction. I don't know why you kick it there. I think he even pseudo admitted he probably shouldn't have done it in the presser, where he was kind of like, yeah, thinking back again, maybe I don't go for it there. The other I really didn't like was, I think with about 9 minutes left, we had a 4th and 1 from the Virginia Tech 44. We're up by 8 points, and this is an opportunity to regain momentum in this game. You call your best play in short yardage, and you just get a first down. Because you don't get it, Virginia Tech has all the momentum anyway. They're probably going to score regardless, whether you punt or not. And then we try and make them jump off sides, which I don't mind either. But if you're going to do that, use that timeout there. And okay, they're not going to jump. We'll run it the next play, or we'll get it. I feel like you have to go for it there to regain that momentum, because punting is, you're giving them the ball back anyway. And especially if you punt it as poorly as they had most of the game, which they ended up doing, it ended up being a touchback. It's a net 24 yards of field position you gave up from punting it into the end zone, which I think they got on the next play anyway. So those are the two things I kind of disagree with. I don't mind going for it aggressively like they did. Those are going to work out more times than they don't. The things I disagreed with were the two that I outlined there.
Especially because you're in opponent territory. You're at the Virginia Tech 44. Go for it. Sam Brown on this drive alone, I'm looking a run of 7 yards, and then the 2 plays before the delay of game was a run of 1 yard, a run of 1 yard. You need it. I think it was less than a yard technically, and that's all they needed. And it's like I don't advocate for the tush push, especially with Ethan, and it's too risky with no backup quarterback having no snaps at all really. But like with Sam Brown actually running pretty well that drive, with Kyle Monungai who had a 2 yard run that drive too. One of them's got to be able to get me at least a yard or something, half a yard.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and Mike, I think you said something interesting that I agreed with in the post game show. You said it's less about the result and more about the process, which I hear in baseball all the time, which is I think the right way to go. It's more about the process than the result, but different sport. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why you send Jay Patel out for a 53-yarder, and then you take the delay game. I believe they took a delay game. Then it's 58 yards. And then you try to send him out again, and then Virginia Tech drops offsides, and then they send him out for a third time. I just wasn't really sure about the decision-making for that whole process, especially because, like you mentioned, it wasn't in the best spot for him. And I'm sure his confidence wasn't all that high either, and I believe it would have been his career long at that point too. I think his career long is 52 right now. And again, on that 4th and 1, I mean, it feels like just the risk of punting it, ironic as you could say, the risk of punting it is greater because, like you said, the Virginia Tech offense was starting to find their form at that point. The rushing offense was really there. They were getting chunk plays, and then the punt was not great. It went out of the end zone for a touchback. I feel like you could have gone to a lot more things, and they were eating Virginia Tech alive in the short passing game as well. So maybe even if you don't run it, if you don't want to go into the teeth of that Virginia Tech defense that have been stopping them a lot of the game, I wouldn't have hated the decision to go pass either. So it definitely left some opportunities out there, but I think the process for some of these plays was right. I like how you mentioned that 4th and goal. I like the decision to go for it and separating that from the actual play call itself. But yeah, I think. I don't want to say it was an experimenting, but I think it was just seeing what looks they can come out of, how they want to handle some of these special team situations, because it's still only the 3rd game of the season, and they have a new punter, their kicker's back, things like that. So I guess we'll have to see how it evolves, and I'm sure Rutgers is going to find themselves in these similar situations again, and I'm very interested to see how they're handled this time out.
Totally agree. Is there any other thoughts you guys had from this game that we haven't touched on that you thought were interesting or noteworthy before we talk about what Schiano said in his presser today?
I don't think we talked about it on the pod or the post game pod at all, but that we just talked about it off air on this pod. But the opportunity to not take the return after the safety, I feel like that's just free yardage basically. Like he fair caught it. I think Alex said at the 19 it was like, just go. Like.
Yeah, he had a lot of space in front of him too. I mean, he could have just at least gotten 5 yards and took a knee.
Something.
He could have gotten more though. Yeah, I didn't get that.
Maddening.
I we should put the over under on the season of how many times they will actually take a return on punts and kicks at 1.5 at this point, because I don't think they've returned a single kick this year.
Nope.
Actually, I think Ben Black returned one.
He did. So maybe we gotta, Howard.
Yeah, I think maybe we have to readjust that. But yeah, they do not want to return the ball. But
although one thing I found interesting, speaking of the returners, I think they're putting KJ Duff out there as a return man as well. They put him next to Dremel, I believe, in a couple of situations. The only reason why I remember this is because every single time the referee would say number 8 is wearing number 98 for this play, every single time. Because I believe who's the other number 8? I'm blanking on who number 8 is on defense.
Jameer Wright Collins.
Jameer Wright Collins. Yeah, he's on the return team, so they put Duff out there in number 98. Again, I feel bad for whoever has to switch out every single time, especially given the fact that he always isn't. He's in on offense too. But yeah, anyways, just an interesting thing to look out for, especially because a lot of before he committed, while he's still being recruited, before he came here, he was kind of billed as a potential tight end. So having him in the return game is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a very promising player, and I think we'll see more of him as the season goes on, if I had to guess.
If you have short hands, you're a return man. You're nothing else. Christian Dremel, return man. Benjamin Black, you have speed, return man, but you have good hands, so it works. Just anyone that has good hands, they don't care anymore. They just don't. He said it before. I'm a punt block team, kick block team, whatever. I'm not a return team. And if you have a Cruikshank, it's a different scenario. You have a Janarian Grant, different scenario. You don't really have those guys. Maybe Ben Black could be that guy, to be honest. But that's one of your top receivers, and he's a true freshman. I'm probably not risking it. I'm just going to take my yardage and just go out there and trust my offense. Yeah,
no, I agree. Overall, I want to put this out there because I think there are a lot of people who think we were overly negative about the performance. We won in Blacksburg. Yeah. This is something we're celebrating. Maybe you don't like that it's not all flowers and sunshine, but there were plenty of things that went wrong this game. We almost blew a 16-point lead that we held on to for almost half the game. So I do think it warrants some criticism. But overall, we were clearly the better team on the field Saturday. I thought we were the much better team going into the game. That's why I was so confident in them winning. We obviously did end up winning, but we almost lost the game due to some lack of execution on offense, some total blown plays on defense in the run game especially, and some coaching miscues, in my opinion. So I think it's warranted to point some things out and also praise where things went well. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. So anyone who thinks we were overly negative, I think you're just not being objective. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's my take on it. So
No, that's fair. Big win, a huge win, one of the best in out of conference wins in recent history. Like that's a great win. Now they should have won by more, but you can't look back at it too much. It is what it is. Like they made some mistakes and they almost cost them, but they won. So a win is a win. That's it.
Yep. Let's talk about this presser. Schiano had his pre-Washington presser today. You guys were both there. You guys both asked some good questions. I thought a lot of good questions were asked in general. Schiano opened the presser with almost a 5 or 6 minute monologue about Washington. It's funny, we were talking about this off the pod, but there's like this new Schianoism that I've kind of been noticing where like, if you notice how he talks about like Howard or Akron. What's up, Alec? You got your point?
I just saw a tweet from Brett McMurphy. I know this has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. Gonzaga is apparently leaving the West Coast Conference to join the Pac-12, so that's pretty big.
Oh wow, that's huge. The Pac-12 might be actually be a
they are back.
Force to be reckoned with.
It's the Big East on the West Coast. This is great.
Yep. But the new Schianoism is when he's talking about like a lower level opponent, he'll be like, they got a good quarterback, number 7. He gets around real easy. He's got some great motors. And I'm just making up terms here. They got 2 really good running backs, number 17 and number 23. They're really, they both present a lot of problems. But then when he's talking about like Virginia Tech, he's like tooting their running back. He's going to be an issue. He was an issue for us last year. Drones, their quarterback's big, strong, fast. He's got all the tools. And then when he's talking about Washington, a team he's never played, so you give him some leeway with the Virginia Tech stuff. You should know who most of the team is from last year. He's talking like, Will Rogers, their quarterback. He's excellent. His completion percentage is 77%. You don't see many guys like that. They have 3 receivers who are really good. They got Washington. They got blah blah blah. Their running back Coleman. Anyway, I'm not trying to make a big deal of that. I just thought it was funny. But anyway, he talked a lot about Washington. Washington is a good team. Their only loss in the season is a rivalry game in a neutral field against Washington State. They do have a stud running back. They have a really good edge rusher. What were some of the things that Schiano said that stood out to you guys in the presser?
You can go first, Alec.
Sure.
Because it's just go on.
Yeah, we were there, and it's still like you're still trying to think of whatever happened. Anyways, it was one funny thing that he said. So he was asked about Ethan Kaliakmanis puking on the field, coming onto the field, and he said, probably just hydrated a little bit too much because it was really hot out there, and it was. Granted, I wasn't outside for the whole thing, thankfully, but yeah, when I was outside, it was pretty hot. I asked him, coaching on a couple of short weeks, the ones that come to mind, obviously this one coming up last year, going from Sunday for Northwestern into a Saturday in the next week to open up the year. 2022, they had Nebraska on a Friday night, same situation. I asked him, what's the most important thing the coaching staff likes to emphasize about those short weeks when you have one less day? And he said, it's all mental. Trust your training, things like that. So that was the most important part. I asked Ethan the same thing, and he said basically the same thing. Just worry about every single day, no matter being present in the current day, and just gotta trust what you already know, what you've done. And he also had a pretty funny answer about Stephen Belichick. He had a pretty funny story. For one, he said that he was asked if he talks to Bill. If he has talked to Bill, he says they talk from time to time. He also had a funny story. I'm trying to see if I can find it in the transcript. Basically, what he said was, let's see. He said when Steve was an assistant at Rutgers, I think it was only a year he was at Rutgers, but he was kind of next to Schiano, and he said that Schiano said, if I call, he told him if I call the same couple of signals like a couple of plays in a row, then just give me a little jab, tell me to quit it, or I guess whatever. And he says. These are his exact words. Well, the first time I signaled it 2 times in a row with the same signal, he punched me in the ribs so damn hard. I'm like, what the heck are you doing? He's like, you told me. He said, you could have just tapped me. So that was a pretty funny anecdote. But a lot of the same things that we usually hear. We're facing a really good team. Always got to keep getting better. He wasn't asked about any injuries, mostly because a lot of the injury issues with the starters, at least, have been pretty much resolved with Bailey, Troy Rainey, Powell all playing on Saturday. So it doesn't seem like that's too much of an issue. A lot of the same things that we've been seeing. Just got to get better every single day, every week, that kind of thing.
Yeah, You kind of hit on all the things. The interesting thing at the end, I thought, was basically said Nassim Brantley. Someone asked about Nassim Brantley. I don't know if it was someone at NJ Advanced Media. He basically just said Nassim didn't play last year. He has to continue to work his way into the lineup. And he kind of just said how tough that room is. It's a very deep wide receiver room this year. I think we've argued before the season started, it's probably the deepest room on the team, maybe, probably. Hard to say there, but that was interesting. And then he also talked about Nasir Montgomery and his special teams play. I know some people on our boards were thinking that was Antonio White, and it wasn't. It was Nasir Montgomery, the preferred walk-on. It just goes back to Greg Schiano, whose preferred walk-ons have always made some type of role for themselves. Nasir Montgomery is a guy that's worked his way up. He kind of just spoke very highly about his effort. He said he's like, if we had to grade his effort in practice every day, it'd be like a perfect score, basically. But then you just see the preferred walk-on still means something at Rutgers, and it's still going to mean something going forward, because I still don't think, if that whole new scholarship limit gets approved, it hasn't gotten approved yet technically, that they're still going to use the preferred walk-on spots for some of those ships instead. So I mean, it always means something, and the special teams has always been a big thing for Greg, and it's always going to be a big thing going forward.
Sorry, just knocked my power cord out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have a full preview for the Washington game later in this week. We're still trying to figure out who our guest is going to be, but like always, we'll have somebody from the Washington side who covers the team to give us some more insight, not only how this team's doing this year, but kind of vibes around the program, because they have new everything, basically new coach, new quarterback, new running back, new receivers, new offensive line. So look for that in your feed later this week. Last thing I wanted to talk about today was kind of a look ahead of how some of our opponents did this past week. Washington played a game against Northwestern, their first Big Ten game. They won, I wouldn't say this is a scoregami, but it's got to be close, 24-5. Northwestern's not good at all this year. I thought Washington clearly looked like the better purple team on the field. Just totally outclassed them. They probably could have won by a lot more if they wanted to. Did either of you? I guess neither of you got a chance to watch that game.
No.
I only saw some highlights of it. But they're 3-1 on the season. Like I said, their only loss is to Washington State. It seems like their main struggle is against the run. So hopefully we can take advantage of that later in the year. The team we would play after Washington is Nebraska. Nebraska had a heartbreaker on Friday night. I'm sure you guys watched that.
Watch out. Yeah.
That was a big game against Illinois. What were some of the things you guys noticed about Nebraska that Rutgers might be able to take advantage of?
Take advantage of? I don't know about that, but their quarterback's damn good. I know, Dylan Raiola, even though they took the L, he just looked really good. He's going to try to pick apart that secondary, and that's where it's going to be interesting. If they can create a pass rush on him, he's a true freshman still. So if you can just pressure him a bit, you can kind of rattle his cage, I feel like, a little bit, but he's got so many talented tools to work with for a true freshman. I'll be honest, I've never seen a true freshman play at this level. I'm trying to
he's
think.
Playing at a high level.
In recent history, maybe then?
I thought Trevor Lawrence was pretty damn good as a freshman. We're talking about upper echelon guys here, but I don't know. A lot of what he seems to do is he seems like the kid in AU who has a wide open shot at the key, but takes 2 jab steps backwards to make sure that he gets a 3 that's 2 feet behind the line.
Yeah, I can see that.
He does make things harder on himself than they need to be sometimes. And he misses some easy shots. They could have won the game on that late touchdown. His tight end was wide open down the field, misses him by 2 or 3 feet. So I do think while his highlights are really they pop, he does. It's almost like he spent a year in his room just watching Patrick Mahomes' mannerisms, highlight reels, and he does everything like him. Everything from his hand motions to the way he walks to his hairstyle to his throwing motion, everything is attempted to be like Patrick Mahomes. And he's got the physical tools to kind of do a good cosplay of it. But in the end, I don't know. I think he's got holes in his game right now, and most freshmen do. What do you think, Alec?
Real quick, the pump fake and then the little side pass. I'm like, oh my God, dude, this guy is just glazing Mahomes.
Yeah, it's crazy. I actually did not watch the Nebraska Illinois game. I unintentionally fell asleep really early on Friday night, so I didn't get to watch that game. But I definitely will be watching it. I have to get caught up on some of my opponent stuff for Rutgers, but that'll be a job for this week. Also, a side note on the Washington game, the 24-5 final score has actually happened 15 times, surprisingly enough.
Jeez.
Last time it happened was 2017, before Saturday. Last time it happened, 2017, Jackson State beat Mississippi Valley State 24-5. And then before that, 1995, and before that, it was 1904. So, it's an old. A lot of them have been over 100 years ago. But anyways, I think that game is winnable. I think one of the more interesting battles is going to be Nebraska's defensive line versus Rutgers' offensive line. I mean, we saw them absolutely obliterate Colorado's offensive line, which, to be fair, is not a very high bar.
Trash.
Yeah, exactly. But still, it's going to be interesting to see because they have some really big guys and guys that are tough to block on that defensive line, particularly on the interior. And Rutgers' offensive linemen, especially on the interior, like Felter, Zelinskis, and Asamoah, have played so well so far this year, really the entire offensive line. So it's going to be an interesting battle. And I agree with Richie. I think if you can put pressure on him, I think Joe Harris-Simiak's going to dial up a lot of blitzes in that game as well. We saw it at certain points against Virginia Tech, like on that first drive where Virginia Tech decides to go for it on fourth down. I think it was their second drive, actually. But Harris-Simiak dials up a blitz. Aaron Lewis comes over as a free rusher and forces a bad throw. So I think that they're going to put pressure on him. It's a matter of, like Richie said, how he responds to that pressure. And it's going to be a really tough environment. I mean, Memorial Stadium, one of the three, I think, Memorial Stadiums in the Big Ten, in Lincoln. It's going to be a really tough environment, especially a 3:30 game. I believe it's their homecoming game, or 4 o'clock. I believe it's their homecoming game, too. I am a little bit surprised that, or not really surprised, but I thought it was interesting to see Penn State and UCLA get big noon kickoff. But anyways, that's going to be an ugly game. But anyways, yeah, I think it's going to be a really tough matchup, especially in the trenches. I think that's where that game is going to be won or lost on both ends.
I feel like Rutgers' style of play is very similar to Illinois', so I feel like that's kind of an advantage, and you saw how Illinois kind of picked them apart a little bit. It's just ground and pound football. Like, it's old school, classic Big Ten football, whereas Nebraska is trying to do this new age thing under Matt Rule. And it works, but they really haven't. Their only good game that they've played against, a good competition they played against, was this past weekend, and they lost. So I don't know if we really know how good or bad this Nebraska team is, because they played UTEP, stinks. Colorado, we just said, stinks. Northern Iowa, just not even FBS, I don't think. I think they're FCS. And then Illinois, their first comp, they lost. So it's hard to tell.
Even then in that Colorado game, like, they played insanely well in the first half, and then the second half they just kind of sputtered. I don't know if they took their foot off the gas or what, but I think it's going to be very interesting to look at for. Who's up? I had it a second ago, but let me check. I'm not sure who is up for them for Nebraska this weekend.
Purdue. They're at Purdue.
Okay, so that should be a win for them. I think that'll be a better barometer than we may think, and I think it's a bottom tier Big Ten team. So I think it'll give us a little bit of a barometer of where they stand in the pecking order.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll learn a lot, I think, from them, because Hudson Card is a good quarterback. Purdue's kind of been bottoming out, but I don't think they're as bad as their current perception is, but I still don't think they're a great team. One note on Washington I forgot to add. Rutgers opened as a 3.5-point favorite in that one. It's down to a 2.5-point favorite for Rutgers. So basically, Vegas thinks that it's basically a pick 'em on a neutral field. So interesting note there. Wisconsin didn't play this past week. They were on a bye, but they lost their quarterback for the year. Tyler Van Dyke is out, and their backup, Braden Locke, didn't really look that good. I mean, mind you, it was against Alabama, but still. True. UCLA, I thought, showed more life against LSU than I anticipated. That game was 17-17 at one point. LSU ended up winning by, I think it was 34-17. But I expected UCLA to be worse, especially given if you looked at their availability chart this past week, they had literally 20 guys out. And then USC, Rutgers' next opponent after UCLA, they lost a heartbreaker to Michigan. A few crucial mistakes there. It was a similar game to the Rutgers game this past weekend, where it seemed like all the momentum was one way, then it started swinging back to the home team. The only difference was Michigan was able to finish off the momentum swing, whereas Virginia Tech was not. Any notes on those for any of those programs before we head out of here for today?
I saw not really. I guess it's a note. Reggie Bush is suing USC for NIL injustice.
my God.
Apparently he wants. I guess he wants some money or something. I don't really know. I didn't read too much into it, but I just saw that before. That's interesting.
How liable is USC to that if it was an NCAA thing? I guess I don't really know. I don't know the ins and outs of NIL and stuff like that. Also, I know, Mike, you sent it to Christian Braswell, activated to the active roster off the practice squad for tonight's game against Buffalo, so that's pretty cool. Good for him. Also, both of Washington's coordinators, obviously we talked about Steve Belichick, the defensive coordinator. Their offensive coordinator is also the son of a coaching legend, Nate Carroll. Nate Carroll. I keep mixing up Brennan and Nate. Actually, it might be Brennan. I don't know. I keep mixing it up because they were both on the Seahawks staff. My beloved Seattle Seahawks, 3-0 by the way. It is Brennan. Okay, Brennan Carroll joins the Washington staff this year as offensive coordinator. He was Jed Fish's offensive coordinator at Arizona. He was also with Seattle for 5 years. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, maybe we'll see Pete Carroll around too, in addition to Bill Belichick.
That'd be cool. I got one more note on Nebraska too. They got a 2026 quarterback commit in Dayton Raiola, the younger brother, and the Twitter world went nuts today, and I love it. Someone said, "Is he just gonna be the next Jackson Mahomes?" Someone said he's Thanasis Antetokounmpo, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys are the worst. Twitter is just it's like hell.
I mean, you sometimes gotta take commitments on guys to keep players happy, and I'm totally fine with that.
That's fine, but it's just like the quote tweets, and everyone's just roasting him, saying like, "Who the hell is this guy? He's a nobody."
Yeah, he certainly doesn't have the same athletic profile as his brother. I think I saw he's like 5'11", 5.63 star, I believe, on Rivals. So
yeah, I mean, he's not a bad prospect by any means. He's just not Dylan.
Yeah, which I wouldn't expect him to be, but
yeah.
All right, so this is the second of two pods for today. I hope everyone's nice and full from all the content we've been forcing down your throats. But for seriously, we appreciate you guys listening. Alec, I'm glad you were at the game and were able to give us some really good insights there.
Yep.
Glad everybody is enjoying, I guess, this new kind of format, which we figured out later in the week. Like we said, we'll have a preview for Washington. And who knows? I know that basketball media day is tomorrow as well.
Ooh.
So we will have you guys there to, pick Steve Peichel's brain and whoever else they make available. So maybe we'll do a pod for that too. We'll see. I don't know if we'll have the bandwidth, but we'll find a way probably.
Of course.
But for me and Richie and Alec, this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast. Signing off.